Welcome back, everyone. Top four time here at the NRG Championship Series. Corbin Hostler, Devin Doomwake O'Donnell joining you for this one. It is time for the top four. Doom, how good has it been so far? We watched an excellent quarterfinals match.
Yeah, I mean, that last quarterfinals match, there was a lot of interesting things going on where Caleb was really far behind in a couple of the games. And I mean, it was just really a clinic of threats that Caleb did not have the answers for. And like I said, we've been watching a lot of Standard today. Standard's been amazing, but we are going to be starting with the legacy seat this time around as one of our players playing the kind of the deck du jour, deck to beat as of right now,
Mhm.
Dabir Scam. But on the other side of things, a little bit of Painter Servant action, which we saw a little bit earlier today, and a deck that is kind of fascinating. There's a lot of different angles of attack this Painter Servant deck can take. And as we mentioned earlier, it's kind of been blossoming over the past couple of years with more releases. And
Mhm.
I am very excited to see how this matchup goes.
Classic as all heck is what I would describe Trainer Servant as, right? As soon as that card was printed, it became a legacy deck. It's been a legacy deck ever since. And you're right, it's been getting some upgrades recently to jump back into contention. And that makes it a ton of fun to watch. I mean, look, it's legacy. We love our old decks, we love the nostalgia. And that's a little bit of what you get. Now, the scam deck, the Demir deck, well, maybe a little less nostalgia, although it has some throwbacks and maybe a little more frustration. But look, something's got to be the fun police, and Painter Servant is what I would describe as a lot of fun. So no rooting interests here, player wise. Of course, we're in the booth, we're impartial, we're just watching. But hey, I'm rooting for some fun, and that is what we're going to get. We can head down to Legacy. I think the players are getting ready. It is time for our semifinals here in Madison. Bolger, Dusterberg, Borgenminke on the right versus Kruger, Harvey, and Wallagora on the left. One of the super teams of our tournament here in the top four. It's going to be Scam versus Painter Servant to get things started.
Yeah. Now, as far as this matchup is concerned, I'm trying to figure out if I can get the deck list up. But as far as the matchup, just from a kind of excuse me, from just fundamental standpoints, I mean, this matchup is going to be a lot of will Ryan have enough disruption between griefs and force of wills and dazes to stop Kamari from going for the combo. The combo meaning grindstone plus painter servant. If you can assemble both of those, you can mill your opponent's entire library. But these blue black decks are flush with interaction. Daze, grief, force of will, tons of ways, especially if you combine, grief plus reanimate, as we see in Undercity Sewers to kick us off here. But the one thing that I will mention about Kamari's deck is there is a lot of redundancy, right? There's a lot of tutors, most namely the Goblin Engineer to help put cards into the graveyard, and then also ways to get those things back. The Engineer itself, Goblin Welder, Agatha Soul Cauldron, and we're leading off on a Vexing Bauble, which is an interesting main deck card, but one that is relatively good in the Legacy format, especially against this blue-black deck, turning off both Grief and Force of Will.
Yeah, pretty interesting. You see Urza Saga Bobble as, hey, you expect that. That's a combo. You don't necessarily expect to see Urza Saga tap for the Bobble, but there it is. And you'd think it's pretty good here, right? Like, I mean, there's definitely some free spells in the like floating around in the format. And hey, you're playing your Urza Saga deck, you can afford to play cards like this. And especially when you're playing Painter Servant, all of these artifacts kind of can work together to give you value, even if something comes into play and then it later hits your graveyard. You can make use out of it. You mentioned the welder, the engineer, all of these different things that exist to facilitate the combo. On the other side, we've got a one card combo in Psychic Frog.
Yeah, don't need any additional cards for that. Now, getting a look at Ryan's hand, I did see a copy of Atraxa and a copy of Reanimate. So, while Vexing Bubble is good at shutting off the interaction, Forcible Days Grief, still does not shut off reanimate. And that is most likely what Ryan is going to go towards, especially given the presence of there's just not really a lot going on Kamari's side, right? There's an Urza Saga, which Kamari can make a token with. Now, the interesting thing is here, right? So Atraxa is going to hit the battlefield this turn. The interesting thing is a lot of the cards that Ryan would want to find are those free spells, Force of Will, Daze, Grief, etc. And all of those are turned off. So it's possible that Kamari can just say, okay, you can have an Atraxa. I'm just going to untap, have this Saga fetch Grindstone, play a Painter Servant, and I'm just going to kill you next turn.
Well, and that's the advantage of playing Painter Servant, right? Because you look at the deck, there's 3 Power Blasts, 3 Red Elemental Blasts. There are some ways to interact with Frog or Atraxa or all these type of things. Now, as it turns out, Kamari doesn't have any red mana at the moment, but you don't. None of that matters. None of this actually matters if you just combo win, as your deck can do.
Ooh.
So the bobble existing, even if Atraxa hits play, can protect in the eventual state of you finding the combo. So yeah, you spelled it out. That's what you're playing towards if you're Kamari. In the meantime, though, if you're Walagora over here, you do what you do, and you played your Psychic Frog, and you connected with your Psychic Frog, and now you're going to put your Attrax into play. Everything's going according to plan. You just don't necessarily have a plan for Bobble.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. So we mentioned the free interaction turned off, Grief, Daze, Force of Will. Ryan, off of the Atraxa, found one of the only cards that is still castable that can interact with the combo in the form of Fatal Push, because Fatal Push can take care of Painter Servant. So that is a huge find here for Ryan, and presumably that's going to go to the hand. With Kamari at 18, there is, potential where if, say, Kamari goes end step, make a token, untap, float mana, get Grindstone, play Painter Servant, and goes to activate the combo. Ryan just goes Fatal Push. And with Kamari at 18, there's maybe a chance that there could be lethal presented with the Atraxa plus Psychic Frog, given, discarding a bunch of cards to hand.
Mhm.
And we even have the Wasteland too. So you can even Wasteland the Saga to get Kamari off of, further away from that Grindstone.
Yeah, and how things can change when you're just looking at now the one soul land, and that is facing it down. I mean, it's a long way to go if you are Kamari here. See how things wrap up here, Ryan, with lots of cards and lots of options, and Kamari with certainly less so. Okay, well, we do see red mana, so that exists along with Fable, which is going to hit the bin, and I believe that's a welder left over.
Yeah, so Ryan is unable to cast the Grief for free due to its evoke cost, but can still discard it to Psychic Frog and then reanimate it, which is exactly what happened. So that is going to take the Fable the Mirror Breaker here from Kamari. Looks like the leftover is just a Goblin Welder, but nothing in the graveyard to weld back in. And yeah, this is looking really rough here for Kamari, facing down maybe lethal this turn at 18. So you have 7, 8, 9, 10, 13. We need to discard 5 cards, and it looks like Ryan has 7 in hand. So I believe this should be a lethal attack this turn.
Yeah, short and sweet over here in Legacy. The scam deck did what it does. That's why it's a premier deck in the format. So if we see Painter Servant fall here, that would give the first game, of course, over to Walagora, Harvey, and a Kruger. We are in the semifinals here. We'll get our graphic updated, but it is Team Trios semifinals as we wait to crown our finalists. That means there are championship series invites that are coming from this event. The winners will earn seats at the end of the year championship event. That's a $35,000 prize pool. And as we've talked about, it's just frankly one of the coolest events on the schedule. NRG goes above and beyond for the players there, not just in the prize pool, but just in the experience, which makes it something everybody's trying to qualify for. And the winners of this event will do that. There are also RC invites on the line. And of course, a whole load of cash. So these players are playing for quite a bit here, and it looks like it will be
Oh,
going the way of Walagora unless we're missing something here and Bulgar is able to come up with something. But Kamari is looking pretty dead here to this giant attack from Ryan.
Yeah, I was. I think Kamari went to pick up the cards, and just want to make sure Ryan does it out. Make sure the math is in fact mathing. But yeah, 7, 13 in play, 5 cards in hand. Looks like we're gonna go entombing. Interesting. And
You can do
Kamari's
it.
like, all
There we
right, all
go.
right, all right, all right.
All right, there it is. Officially game one. Ryan Wildgora. That takes it down. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at these deck lists. Actually, I'd love to take a look. We know the scam list. Let's take a look at the Painter's Servant list before we hop into another game here. But check that out. You see it. A lot of red cards. A lot of cards you may not be familiar with, but are actually, some old school legacy stuff here. Painter's Servant, Goblin Welder. One of the biggest new additions is obviously Agatha Soul Cauldron. But what stands out to you from this list when you look at a 2024 version of Painter's Servant, Devin?
Yeah, I mean this is not your grandmother's painter servant deck.
Yeah.
So one thing that there are a couple things that I want to highlight. So first and foremost, we saw main deck Vexing Bauble, which to its credit, it did stop a few of Ryan's cards, maybe made him play it in a way that he didn't quite want to. But there are 3 copies in the main deck. This is not just a one of that you're going to
Mhm.
fetch off of Urza Saga some of the time. This is a card that Kamari wants to draw. When you're playing 3 copies, you're basically saying, I want to draw this card in most of the games. And, Kamari is making a statement with those baubles. And then the other thing I want to point out is 6 blasts. So 3 pyroblast and
Yeah,
3 red elemental blast, which is not something you see outside of very, very unhealthy situations where, people are main decking a bunch of blasts for, Jace or Delver or whatever the blue threat is. But the reason that they're so good in this deck is because they're turned on by Painter Servant, where
that's
if you
right.
Painter Servant name blue, Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast have endless numbers of targets. So a lot of cool stuff here. That Chaos Defiler, I hope we get to see that in action too.
Yeah, including lands, by the way, with those blasts, right? You can turn
Yep,
them into one mana stone rains.
get them.
A lot of fun stuff is turned on because of Painter Servant. Certainly a very unique deck. All right, well, I think maybe we want to head over. What are we thinking? Standard here? There's Nadu in the modern. So I guess that's what's available, though. We'll get to standard if we get an opportunity, but modern is available now. So that is what we are going to head down to. And here we go. Uh, Look at these cards on the left. There's a brand new one on the right and a very old one on the left.
Yeah, it seems like there's only one deck that is able to take down Nadu, and that's kind of what we saw a little bit yesterday. Well, not in the finals yesterday, almost in the finals, but Garrick Alford, as we've seen a couple times on camera today and yesterday, has been kind of tearing up into the Nadu matchup with his Jeskai control deck, and that is exactly what Charles is looking to do here. Flage has resolved and is on the battlefield, and Dom doesn't have, excuse me, a lot of stuff going on here. Looks like we're going to cord for one.
Yeah, Dom Harvey, of course, one of the premier players of really, honestly, many modern decks, but especially decks like this Nadu deck. And here knows what he's doing. Here comes the Safekeeper setting it up. So the thing about the Court of Callings in this deck is they almost feel like, Court of Callings obviously very powerful. It's a combo piece and it's a tutor and all that. But the first one in this deck almost feels like, oh, that was the first Court of Calling. That's just setting up for the second one, which is what kills you. So that hasn't come yet, though. Charles is going to have an opportunity here, although it's going to be harder to interact in play. That's an encore and a safekeeper. So the combo is in play for Dom if Nadu is able to make it. So we'll stick with this for a minute before we hop over to standard. But let's see how Charles is able to navigate from this spot. Having Flage resolved and active is honestly a really great spot to be in.
Yeah, the games, for lack of a better term, the games look a little bit more interesting when Nadu is not involved. As you see here, Flage and Dom is just trying to get basically just keep as much stuff on the battlefield as he can until he finds a copy of Nadu. I think that was a Court of Calling, and I believe the hand right now is I think Court of Calling Shuko, which Dom is so close, right? 3 lands,
Right.
2 creatures. They can cord for 2, but needs to be able to cord for 3. That's the magic number. And I think there's a counter spell in Charles's hand anyways. So even if that cord were to be cast for 3, Charles has the counter spell. So yeah, I mean things are looking really good here for our Just Guy control player in the form of Charles Dusterberg. one thing that we really talked about in this matchup is how good Wrath of the Skies is,
Yeah.
where able to clean up all the small creatures along with the Shuko and Urza sagas. And I think this Jeskai control deck is reasonably well positioned to be able to have, at least a fighting chance against Nadu.
Yeah, it certainly seems like the players we've seen playing it um, feel like they have a plan against Nadu, right? Like it doesn't always work, but we see the way their cards line up. Obviously, we watch Garrick play a lot of it, and it looks good, even if it doesn't always work, right? So here we go. Court of Calling,
Ooh.
X2 for Dom, and it's just going to run straight into a counter spell, and that's it. That picks it up. That is game one over Charles Dusterberg, who is able to get his team on the board 2-1 if you look at it in terms of games. All right, so we want to head over to back to Legacy. You think? Check out Painter Servant.
If they're ready, if not, we can go over to standard. I know that we got a note from production. Oh, Legacy is ready. Okay. So here we are. That is Kamari on the play. Leads off with an Urza Saga. No copy of Vexing Bauble this time, and that means that the coast is clear for Ryan to just go ahead and slam this Grief. So Grief, taking a look at a Dragon Engine. Don't want to put that one in the graveyard. A Pyroblast and I think that's a Goblin Welder, right? The promo Goblin Welder. I
Yes.
believe. Okay. So yeah, chooses to take the Pyroblast, which is maybe a bit of a tell here for Kamari that I mean maybe he just doesn't care about the Goblin Welder because there's nothing in the graveyard, but there could be a situation where maybe Welder is live. Maybe or maybe Ryan has something like an Orcish Bowmasters to handle the Goblin Welder. As we see an Ancient Tomb, that's gonna make a Saga token. Now, we talk about kind of these value saga plans, and this is maybe a matchup where it would normally not be very good, but this painter deck does have a ton of artifacts, right? And it is capable of making these constructs very, very large.
Right. Yeah, it's the slow plan, right? If you look at it that way, but sometimes it works, and that's what's going to happen here. Is Ancient Tomb is going to make another one.
It'll be interesting to see, excuse me, what Kamari wants to fetch off of the Urza saga because we saw how the Vexing Bubble did a little bit of work last game,
Hmm.
shutting off the Force of Wills, the Griefs, and all that stuff. But it's possible you just want to go for a combo piece. Okay, we're going to go for neither of those. How about a Soul Guide Lantern, which that is going to not only remove the Grief, but leave the Lantern in play as
Hmm.
a potential option later on to prevent Ryan from going for something like Reanimate on Traxa with Entomb. So I think I like that. And
I was going to
the
say that.
Lantern the lantern is also pretty nice with Goblin Welder, where, if the lantern gets sacrificed, you can then rebuy that with the welder.
Okay, so we're seeing some really different kind of lines that you're playing for, right? If you're Kamari here, thinking about Welder and all of this stuff. Yeah, I was going to ask you how you liked that Soul Guide Lantern line as opposed to being more aggressive, but it really seems to have set Kamari up here in a great spot. And, those constructs are they're not big right now, but they're not small either, right? They will get there, and that's Ryan's going to go digging with a Ponder. Spot a
Yeah,
Brazen Borrower in there. Not sure what else.
Barber pretty good at answering one of these constructs. The Great Furnace also going to pump up those constructs a little bit
Oh, that's
too.
right.
And Kamari does have the option to just, hard cast that Dragon Engine next turn. So there is certainly a line available. But I think I like the lantern because it also means that your Goblin Welder actually does something. Like there's no artifacts in the
Right.
graveyard currently, and now now that you have the ability to start looping the Soul Guide Lantern, maybe even Kamari wants to say, "Hey, I'll just sack the lantern, draw a card, and then weld it back into play." Just to kind of get the cards flowing and try to dig a little bit deeper to try and find the combo.
Yeah, that's a good point. He can really just play the fair game here. Fair in that sense, they're just kind of looping one card at a time just to dig a little deeper. Because Ryan's not putting any pressure on his life total. The frog is not out of control in this particular circumstance, and now we're just going to see a brainstorm follow up. I do not hand Ryan, not an underground, but nothing to reset the top.
All right, what are we looking at here? So I believe he is going to hang on to that borrower. Question is, so here, like now Ryan's in a position where do we start getting aggressive with the frog? Like we could exile 3 cards from the graveyard, maybe deal some damage, discard 1 or 2 cards. You do have, I believe, the hand is right now is Troll, Borrower, Fatal Push, and one additional card that I can't quite tell. So does have answers to both of the constructs with Push and Borrower. Is that a Toxic Deluge? I can't tell what that last card is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That would be not a bad one here while you still have some life to play with, that's for sure. And you'd clean up the welder as well. So, all right, first step, swinging in with Frog.
Ooh, interesting. Okay. I think Kamari is lining up a double block here. At least thought about it, right?
And then goes
And
for no blocks. Yeah.
yeah, that would have actually been a disaster because then Ryan could have fatal pushed one of the constructs, making it down to a 3-3, and then discarded 2 more cards to have a 3-4 frog. And that would have been kind of a disastrous turn here for Kamari. So heads up play, I think choosing not to block, I think that does make a lot of sense. It looks like no blocks were declared, I believe. So pick up a card and we're going to pass. But now we're kind of in this weird damage race
Right.
where, constructs versus this psychic frog. The thing is, Ryan does have plenty of ways to answer, right? The fatal push, the brazen borrower. So he's going to be able to, answer some of these constructs. And actually, Ryan says, no, I'm just going to take all the damage, not choosing to fatal push a construct. Very interesting.
That it looks like a Fable follow up here for Kamari. Yes, this is Legacy. And that is Fable. Now, it would be pretty good here if it resolves. It does resolve, so it adds another body to the board for Kamari. As you can see, it makes that 2-2, which is going to create treasures, which, by the way, are artifacts that would pump the constructs even more. Also allows you to get rid of some extra cards if you need to. As you can see, there's 2 cards in Kamari's hand. One of them's face up, one of them's face down, due to Ryan knowing about one of them. That's what you're looking at there. But that Fable is certainly going to keep the pressure on for Kamari without having to commit any more mana. And that means that Ryan is not only facing down the pressure on his life total, he's fallen to 12, and he's going to be getting hit for an even greater amount next turn. But it's threatening to give Kamari access to even more cards to find the combo pieces. So this is probably the last turn for Ryan to really impact the board before Kamari snowballs here. So here we go. We do know that there are tools for Ryan to work with. There's a fatal push in hand at a minimum. There's some additional cards. We've got a land drop here. In fact, we've got a playset of Underground Seas here, so we can go up to
So
4
many of
mana.
those. Yeah, and I almost wonder if Ryan's decision to not fatal push, I wonder if that means we're setting up for discard a certain number of cards to get the frog past 4 toughness and then deluge for 4. So with what, 5 cards plus the C, that's 6 cards in hand. So you'd have to discard 3 cards to make the frog a 4/5 and then deluge for 4. So you'd be left over with, you could say discard land, reanimate, brainstorm, and then deluge with borrower fatal push as the leftovers. I wonder if that is what we're lining up here. We could. I mean,
We're certainly doing frog math.
the other option is just borrower plus fatal push the 2 tokens, but that doesn't answer the other 2. So yeah, we're discarding cards. I think that's what Ryan's doing.
I like this. This is a psychic frog play. This is what this card enables. Is this card game looked maybe otherwise not I don't say hopeless for Ryan, but you were going to try to line up a lot of answers against the threats, and you were still going to be falling behind because of the Fable and threat of combo and everything else to Kamari. But instead, let's just go aggressive with this frog in terms of dumping my hand into it. What I mean by aggressive here, and then wipe the board. And yeah, I may not have many cards left in my hand afterwards, but that was going to be the case either way, whether you spend them all on your frog or whether you spend them all on removal. But here
Yeah,
it is. Frog gets
and
in,
oh,
draws a card.
I was going to say fantastic draw
Uh
here
huh.
for Ryan defending that Forcible because,
Yeah.
this lineup is a little bit awkward against a deck that has so many blasts, like 3 Power Blast, 3 Red Elemental Blast. So being able to rip that Force of Will to protect the frog if a blast is drawn off the top for Kamari, massive, massive find here for Ryan. And yeah, this is going to clean up the board. We are going to be drawing a card with Lantern. And okay, that makes sense. Yep, draw card with lantern that you can weld the lantern back in using the constructs.
Yep.
And that means that, Kamari is basically up a card, going to keep the lantern in play. But yeah, I was going to say Kamari does have an out to find a blast, but with Ryan drawing that Force of Will, this is looking kind of dicey. And Psychic Frog showing how just completely messed up it is in these decks.
Yeah, it enabled something that nothing else would have there, and it was really very powerful. And honestly, it was pretty cool to watch. So, all right, that said, Kamari here is going to untap, draw a card, and now we're going to get to chapter 2 on Fable the Mirror Breaker, which of course means you have the ability to rummage, as they call it, discard 2 cards and draw 2 new ones. So we could get there, although I see an ancient or a furnace and what looked like a welder. So, all right, furnace is gonna or mountain either way. One of those is gonna come into play here. Does Kamari have an answer to Psychic Frog?
Looks like the leftovers are Vexing Bauble and I believe Goblin Engineer. So, not exactly the best leftovers, and neither of those really answer a frog. Now, there is a situation where we could maybe go towards chaos. I'm gonna hold on. I'm gonna read the text on Goblin Engineer. It only gets back 3 or less, correct? Goblin Engineer and TG.
Yeah.
I believe
Yes,
it's
that
3
is
or less.
correct.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's
Okay. Yeah.
so there's also the bauble would have been interesting there because it actually turns off the force of will, right? So if this
True.
if you find a blast off of cracking this soul guide lantern right here, you can actually hit the psychic frog. Now that does not appear to have been the case. It looks like mountain and something else anyway. But the engineer hits play. So the bauble does provide some value there. So, and again, the psychic frog, unless we find a way for Ryan to win with it. But how about this? Goblin engineer goes and puts ensnaring bridge into the yard.
I like it. I mean, the frog is big enough to get, or big enough to where it's not going to be able to be attack past the bridge. Now, Ryan still has that fatal push in hand. So the fatal push can take care of the engineer, which will sort of undo that bridge. But yeah, you brought up a very good point. The Vexing Bauble turning off that Force of Will means that Kamari is live to draw a red elemental blast. The question is, if life totals are correct, do we just have lethal
It
this
might be.
turn?
Yeah, I
Already
count
at
to
7.
7. Yeah.
And I mean, I guess you're in a position where, maybe okay,
Doesn't
maybe
do
we
it.
have life totals incorrect. Because I was gonna say you're maybe in a position where if you say discard the Force of Will, then it's offline, but the Force of Will's already offline due to the Vexing Bubble. So interesting that Ryan chose not to go for it.
Yeah,
I
it
wonder.
he could have. He opted not to because it life totals look correct to me. He's at 3. He's got his life pad there for us. Take a look at. So maybe he's playing around something there from Kamari. Either way, though, Kamari is going to get a chance to untap, turn the reflection, turn the fable into a reflection of Kiki Jiki.
Ooh,
Did we go down to
engine.
1 with our ancient tomb?
Yeah, engine coming into play. So the engine is going to allow Kamari to, I think it's discard the hand, draw 3, and it only happens when it enters from the graveyard. It is a 2/2 double strike. So that's going to be hand discarded. And we're going to pick up 3 cards, 2 engineers, and something I didn't quite see. I don't think that's going to be enough, unless maybe it was a blast. I mean, Ryan falling down to 4th. This is actually kind of a tight damage race. But yeah, with Kamari at 1, I think that we are probably done here. We're going to pick up a
Yeah.
card off the bubble, and that is going to do it.
Handshake gives Ryan Walagora the win, the first match victory of the semifinals for his team. Scam taking down Painter's Servant 2-0. Welcome back to the booth. I'm Corbin Hostler, joined by Devin Doomwake O'Donnell. It is the semifinals of the NRG Championship Series here in Madison, Wisconsin. We have watched our team trios battle it out in standard, modern, and legacy all day long, and it is all coming down to this. We're going to find a winner in this semi. We'll get a winner in our other semifinal, and then it will be time to crown some champions and three faces who you will see at the NRG Championship at the end of the season, that $35,000 prize pool event everyone is trying to qualify for. So All right, we're almost there. Devin, Painter Servant did not hold up very well there as much as we wanted it to against the scam deck. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we expected, right? The Scam deck is very good at breaking up combos, and the Painter Servant deck, to its credit, does have a lot of other avenues of attack. Like there's Urza Saga, there's Fable the Mirror Breaker, Phyrexian Dragon Engine. There's other ways to kind of help grind out some of the more slow advantage decks, but
Mhm.
that's not what Scam is about. Scam is about just taking your best card and then slamming a threat it's kind of like a weird tempo deck in a way, but less of a all in reanimator and more of like closer to the Delver style decks. But
Yeah.
I believe we are going to take a look at standard here as I think they might be in game number 3. So let's see if we can get you on over to standard. And yes, they are. So Frederick against Will, game number 3, Golgari against Amir. And if you're a Will Kruger fan, we didn't come here at a great time. There's a Glissa, I believe a Cruelty of Gix and a Liliana in play, and Will has no non-land permanents.
Yeah, not exactly where you want to be. Now, I guess on the bright side, if this does were to go Frederick's way, your teammate Ryan picked up his win. So that, of course, means even if you were to lose, your team is not out of it yet. That would send it over to the modern seat. But before any of that, if you're Will Kruger, we say, is there a way to dig out of this? I mean, the answer, as you laid out, probably not. All you have to do is take a quick glance at the board to see that this one is probably out of reach for Will. But he has not picked his cards up yet. He is thinking about it. He's got a couple of spells in hand, and we'll see if he's able to find a line that keeps this game going.
Yeah, it looks like an Urtai and a Gix in Will's hand, which something. I mean, you can Urtai the Glissa. Unfortunately for Will, there's only 6 mana in play, so can't even double spell this turn. I guess you can go towards Restless Reef to answer the Liliana. If you answer the Liliana, then the cruelty, I believe the cruelty should be, I don't know what chapter it's on. There's no die on it, but maybe we can get coverage to confirm that. But it looks like Will is going for the Urtai on the Glissa. That gets one of the threats off the battlefield, but again, the combination of Liliana plus Cruelty plus Cottage plus Dread Knight plus the Virtue, it feels like it's going to be way too much for Will to overcome.
And Shieldred in hand is going to make sure to slam the door here for Frederick. Take a look
Oh,
at this, though. Sorry, go ahead.
the Cruelty was on no counters. I think. I don't know. Oh. I think what Frederick did is attack with the Glissa and remove the counters from the Cruelty. Very heads up line.
Yeah, which of course then the way these work sagas they re-trigger. Of course, if that ever happens, that's how you can get extra uses out of them when you can do tricky things like that. But all of this is just showing off at this point for Frederick, who has the game well and truly locked up. It would seem, although Will is still thinking about it, still looking at his cards, still, how can we get into
He's
this? Now,
thinking.
remember, his teammate Dom Harvey in the modern seat is down a game to Charles. So if you're Will, you don't want to write this off, even though you feel like you are very, very far behind. You want to see if you can get anything out of it. And that is why he's not scooping. He's just passing the turn back to Frederick, who begins to resolve all of the various cards he has to work with. He's got a couple cards in hand. He's got a couple cards in play that can attack. He's got a creature land. He's got a saga that is ticking up as well. Looking very good. And you know what, though? We have an update from the back table. Devin, what did we see? This is good. This is Jeskai
Oh,
and Bant. We have a result.
Charles Dusterberg takes down the match over Dom Harvey. So this is for all the marbles, and this is not looking great for Will's team. Yeah, and that means this is going to do it. So the winner of this match will take down the entire match here, and I see a Dread Knight coming in, putting Will down to 6. And I mean, we don't like to call matches, but it seems like it's just all but about over. As we see another copy of Shieldred here for Frederick, and that's going to hit the battlefield. And all right, Will's got a might token though. That might token. All right, never mind.
It might not either, though. Good games all around. Will, Dom, and Ryan offering the handshakes too. Frederick, Charles, and Kamari, who, with that win, punch their ticket into our finals here in Madison NRG Championship Series Team Trios.
Yeah, that was a
Congratulations to them.
That was a great match. I mean, we didn't see a ton of that standard match, but just overall, the painter games were pretty interesting. We saw a little bit of Jeskai versus Nadu. We kind of got to
Mhm.
see, and that's another story of the event too. We've been talking about this all weekend. What deck is going to be the one that can dethrone Nadu? Now, to be fair, the finals yesterday was just a little bit short. Garrick fell just shy of losing in the finals to Nadu. So we'll have to see if maybe history can repeat itself as we have Jeskai on one side of the bracket. I presume we probably have Nado on the other side. So we'll have to see exactly how the finals turns out.
Yeah, well, and you know what? The finals are what is coming to you next. We appreciate all of you hanging out with us. Look, Devin's been at this all day. You've seen a ton of magic, and we've got one more round for you before we let you take a break for some dinner, Devin. But we are going to be back on the other side of the break for the finals, the championship here in Madison of our team trios. Stick with us. We'll see you then.